This video is a recording of a live event, about an hour and 15-minute webinar, and it's really packed with all sorts of energy healings and information and explorations into the fine abstract layers of creation. I hope you love it. If you do, please like and subscribe. Thank you everyone for being with me. What is energy healing? Energy healing is a technology of using consciousness to affect matter, basically. So energy healing works. Energy healing is a sort of broad category, works just as well for making changes in the physiology as it does for making changes in any area of life. In these energy healing sessions and the live webinars, we're often actually using the energy healing to affect changes in all sorts of areas of the environment all over the place. So it's a lovely technology. It's a very consistent technology. It leverages a specific law of nature of the way consciousness works. And I have this beautiful background from one of my friends in Europe. So thank you for sending me this yesterday. I'm like, oh, I'm going to use that one. And the way I'm using this background is I'm using it a little bit as a diagram or a map of consciousness, the ocean of consciousness. You can see it looks like the ocean back there. It is the ocean. And what we've got here at the bottom where the water is, I'm using the water as a metaphor for the ocean of pure consciousness or pure being, pure unmanifest being. And then all this cloud sky area represents the material level of creation, all that comes from being, all that expression. Energy healing is a technology for using consciousness the way we interact with the gap. All of its consciousness, all of its being. There's no part of it that's not that source material. It all comes from source. Source creates from within itself, within its own nature. So it's not going outside itself to get resources. All the resources are internal, just as our consciousness is. And our attention or our awareness is that stuff out of which the source of creation is comprised. And so we're using our access, a personal access to source material, to interact with the manifest expression of the source of creation in a way to promote evolutionary change. Evolution is defined as divinity embodying into its expression. Now, all of it's the divine, and the divine is in every part of it. But as you and I know, there are the laws of nature that are responsible for the one diversifying into the many, allow suffering. That's the way this world has got this potential, for people to get uncomfortable, for things to not be easy, for difficulties to arise, illness, all kinds of stuff. So the principle here is that there is a process taking place in our reality whereby the absolute good, that is this source of creation area down here, is absolutely life-supporting. It is pure life force. It is sprouting from its silent, unmanifest, qualityless home into its expressed values. And we, as human beings, and our awareness or attention interacts with that process in order to promote more perfect, to promote, or I would say optimize, the integration of the absolute goodness of the source of creation with all of its expressed levels of creation. And so the way we do it, the technology of energy healing, is to work down here. We work down here in the gap, in the junction between the unmanifest and the manifest, because that's the power center right there. That's where it all starts. Well begun is half done. If we can catch a problem or a situation at its inception, then we do less and accomplish more. right? We take our awareness or attention, we bring it down into this deep level of awareness, and then we allow the intention of totality, the cosmic intention, you could say, the will of God, if you want to look at it that way. From a religious context, we allow the will of God to determine what is the adjustment, what is that move that has to take place in that gap between the unmanifest source of creation and the manifest field in order to produce the specific desired effect. So we go into the gap with a bit of an intention, right? Oh, I don't want to have pain anymore. Or in the case of today's session, that digestion is optimized. This is the technology of energy healing. It sounds kind of complicated, but it's actually not that complicated. It's fairly easy. It's something that's happening all the time anyway, because the dynamics of the gap are flowing all the time anyway. So it's not like we have to really do anything. We just need to get into that space and allow our own highest intentions and our own potential to be our best possible self, to get engaged with that process that's taking place, where the one is showing itself as many. It's expressing itself as many. The one expresses as the many. And the reason we do these live webinars is so that we can do that work together over and over. We just keep doing it. And each time we do that process, we have the experience and the way to own knowledge, the way to own your own greatness is on the steps of experience and understanding, right? So we do it. You feel it. We feel it. We feel the movement in the gap. And then Dorothy explains, and this is what's happening, and that's what's happening. So then the intellect goes, oh, when it feels like this, it means this is happening. And when it feels like that, it means that is happening. So you can start to put together like sequences and make connections between experience and understanding. That's why we do these live healing webinars. That's why we do them. And that's why we've got the question and answer box up there so you can ask me questions as we're going along. And it's, oh, and here's this beautiful point from Our Lady in the San Francisco area. Very easy to access the gap. So natural, because being wants to be known. And that's really true. I mean, this process is so evolutionary, the process of taking awareness to the gap and engaging with the dynamism by which wholeness creates the whole universe. Like it's evolutionary, and evolution is supported. Because the big story going on here is that one being is evolving, and the way it evolves is it becomes more perfectly integrated, more perfectly integrated, more perfectly integrated into its own creation. And we're its own creation. We're part of its own creation. We're like little concentrated hubs of consciousness. It's a very sweet place to be. All right, so that's my big long description of what is energy healing for today. I would like to now give us all 3 minutes of eyes closed just to feel our way into the silent source of creation, just to give everybody a chance to establish as a collective, our healing collective, to get into that space. So I'll ask everyone to close the eyes, and after 3 minutes, I'll ask everyone to open the eyes and then take a minute or so to come out, because we want to integrate as much of the silence as possible. This is one of the first levels of the experiential side of the live webinar. All right, let's close our eyes. All right. Let's take a minute and then slowly open the eyes. Thank you to the source of creation for being us, for being everything, for being our ancestors and their role in the presence of our precious bodies. Thank you to the eternal tradition of wisdom that connects the unmanifest source of creation to the entire manifest field of creation. May today's healing webinar provide amazing, wonderful, life-transforming support for everyone's digestion. May we all come out of today's session with stronger, more stable, better discriminating ability to process all types of experiences, both physical material as well as non-physical. Thank you so much, everyone, for being with me. It's always really, really sweet to be with everyone and to do these healing webinars. Thank you. All right. So the topic of today's session is energy healing for digestion. And in yesterday's session, the two really most important points that came out were that digestion isn't just the way we metabolize physical material, but also the way we metabolize all experiences. So if you look at a beautiful picture, essentially you're metabolizing that. You have to metabolize that. There's some aspect of digestion that takes place with everything. And some of the most interesting and challenging, like it comes down to how do we handle challenging situations and circumstances. And often those have emotional components. That isn't actually what I was going to say. The 2 points I was going to actually bring out were that we did a healing for discrimination, and discrimination, increasing discrimination in the metabolic process allows each person to pick and choose what to keep and what to throw in a more, I would say, intentional manner. Because up till now, it's like we go through our life and we just experience what we experience and we eat what we eat. And then, God willing, it all goes down okay. And so increased discrimination helps you make decisions and choices that are aligned better with Dharma, better with your evolution. Life is so short. We want to consume that which will take us directly to the goal of being a perfect embodiment of divine intelligence and bypass whatever is not going to be useful, basically. So that requires some discrimination, and it might even require, on the longer term, not wasting time with whatever is not useful. The other important healing that came through yesterday's session was for stabilizing the metabolic process, because it's natural for metabolism to be a little less in the morning and then to become stronger at the midday and then to become less in the evening. And once the sun goes down, the digestive juices just aren't as strong as they are when the sun is up. And we talked quite a while about the relationship between the planets and the effects of the various planets on the digestive system, on the physiology. Within the context of that wave of metabolic strength, it's good for each day that we start out at about the same place and we come to about a nice, consistent, reliable level of metabolic heat in the body, and then, fade off like that. I realize that what I'm saying could affect changes in the digestion through the seasons, right? Because especially if a person lives fairly close to the northern, like the Arctic Circle, or up in that higher area, people who live in the Arctic Circle, they have to eat something, but they might have like 3 months of darkness. But it's my experience that the metabolism does adapt to these different climactic changes. And so there are ways of getting around that. Even if you are having 3 months of night, it doesn't mean that you can't eat, but that the body will fall into its own rhythms, basically. So that there's some consistency. Even there's some consistency of the rise and fall of the metabolic fires and the heat in the body. And we spend a lot of time talking about where do the metabolic fires come from and how you gain access to that source of that fire that is also the same source as the fire of discrimination. So access to that friction that's created. It's in two places. It's created here, where wholeness rests and where wholeness it prepares itself to manifest, basically. And in that junction between being like, I'm not doing anything, to I'm going to do something, right there like a friction is created. So that's really where the fires of digestion begin. But there's another junction point where the unmanifest meets the manifest. And that's also important. And that's where soma is produced, which we didn't talk much about yesterday, but we've talked about so extensively on previous occasions. And I also have a knowledge base page on it. So I'm not going to go heavily into soma during today's session. But you can look up information on my knowledge base about that. We're just going to use it. We're just going to use that information. All right, so there were some really amazing questions that came in, and so many that came in I thought I would use today to just go over the different questions, all the different questions, and we'll do healings for everything. So many beautiful points. I have one friend, one of the ladies who's participating with us, is really masterful with her words, and she's brought up 5 solid and well organized, very intelligent, very discriminating mind and heart. And she's brought up these beautiful points. So I thought I would share some of these. And the other thing is, my husband pointed out that it would also be good to go over a few practical points related to just eating in general. One sweet lady on her question said that she's a dietitian and she helps, I think she might be in Europe. She's a functional nutritionist, and she was really enjoying the information. So I thought I might bring out a few more just basic points from Ayurveda, because that's where my knowledge base is founded, and may these be useful. One thought that seems to be useful is that when metabolism is slow or sluggish, and I think somebody actually asked this question last night, that they have very slow metabolism. This is a byproduct of having excess amounts of undigested material in the body. And when it's like a self-feeding loop. It's both the byproduct and it also causes. So both together. That the slow digestion will cause when the food isn't digesting in a robust manner, then it can sit in the body for some time. And when it sits for some time, it can sort of ferment. It can sort of get like I think maybe moldy isn't quite the right word, but I think fermented is a better word. And it becomes kind of, and it collects mucus around it. It becomes mucusy, and it really can sort of make a mess in the system. The material that builds up inside people's arteries is also made of the same stuff. It's just like the food just isn't going anywhere. It's sitting around. It's growing old in the system. And in Ayurveda, that's called ama. And you can test how much ama is in your body by using a tongue scraper. Because in the morning, when you wake up, if you scrape the tongue with a tongue scraper, it will show you about that stuff that comes off your tongue is this, like, basically unmetabolized incompletions, food incompletions, essentially. Of course, it's related to incompletions, right? Unfulfilled desires and projects that would like to be, that would like to find their expression in this reality. And if we want to take incompletions deeper into a, like what's the seed of incompletions? The seed of incompletions is the lack of expression of one's pure potential, right? Because the potential is to do amazing, great, wonderful things and to be a perfect embodiment of the divine. And when that process isn't rolling out in an efficient manner, then there can be, it's like it's rolling, but it's either rolling very slowly or we're, as per our webinar, I think two webinars ago, if we define and identify the experience not here, but like up here somewhere, then what we experience is, oh, here's something that wants to manifest, but it hasn't manifested yet. So if we're catching our own internal experience somewhere in the process of manifestation, but not up here where it's fully manifested and not down here in the gap where the vision of the manifestation is complete, then what happens is life experience gets interpreted as incompletions and lack and desires that aren't being fulfilled. So the secret, the gift of consciousness and of energy healing is to, this is what we're doing now. This is the healing. And by the way, I would like to say as we start diving into this healing, during our moments of silence at the beginning of this session, a lot of integration was taking place for our healing collective. Last night, it was like everybody was in different places, but today it feels like we're all very much together and very much sort of unified in our focus, which is lovely. And both are lovely, but I just want to say that that's what it looks like to me, and I appreciate it. Anyway, desire always has a seed. It always has a moment of inception. And that moment of inception is found right down here in the gap between the great fountainhead of resources and intelligence and creativity that are constantly flowing from the source of creation into the expressed value of the creation. And there our dreams are born. Our dreams are born in the gap. Dreams are born in the gap. That's why in dreams, we enjoy nuanced feelings. There are a lot of feels. My daughter, who's a millennial, she calls them feels. Oh, that song has so many feels in it. But who's feeling those feels? Were the musicians feeling those feels when they were playing the music? Hopefully. But if the listeners have refined perception, they will take that music and they will define the feelings themselves, and that enhances the value of the music. And in fact, that's exactly how our webinars work. I am understanding what's going on through my filter, but all of you are interpreting it through your filters. And each person's filter shines a different angle of light on the process and illuminates the actual healing that takes place in a sort of broad spectrumed way. That's why I'm so grateful that all of us are here together today and that we're so coherent. All right. So what are we doing in the gap here? I got off on a side tangent. But I get it back. Ah, yes. The expression of pure potential. The expression of pure potential. Every desire. So what we want to do is we want to, oh, okay, I got it. So what happens is we're dropping the intention. How can we heal this? How can we make ourselves, how can we like reconstruct our internal landscape so that any desire or any intention is always appreciated at its inception point. And the incredible resource that's available at the inception point, because it's all coming fresh from the absolute, carries all the way through the manifesting process, so that that intention makes its way entirely to the material level of creation, unbound, unrestricted, unconfined. It makes its way with grace to the surface. There's that. So that's a sankalp. That's that word I used yesterday, which means the seed of the intention, basically, or the seed of the healing desire here, our desire. What I'm seeing is all of us have this sort of spectrum through which we are experiencing the way our potential grows and develops and is expressed in our life. And everybody's a little different. Some people like will get a little hung up at, like, say, the emotional level or the astral or the mental or physical levels. Like, we all have, I'd say, blockages or boundaries at different levels along the spectrum. So whichever level is lighting up for each person, that's where the awareness goes. That's the point where greater integration of totality, of wholeness, is required to support the liberation of your potential to manifest as you intended it. And for me, I'm kind of looking at the whole thing. It looks like the range of a musical instrument or anything. I tend to think in musical terms a lot of times. So the range of, because it goes from its low note up to its high note, and each person has a different note in there, or a different set of notes, where the melody tends to get a little stuck. And so all the points are precious, and all of them are divine in their nature, and all of them are looping back from those points where the melody gets stuck. It's looping back into the source of creation, looping back, referring back to the silence between the notes. It's the silence between the notes that provides the feels in the music. It's not the notes themselves, it is the silence, it's the relationship between them. It's the way they interact, and we talked about that a little yesterday too. I'm noticing, as this folding is happening, the release of a lot of discordant feelings. There are habits of becoming a little gripped by feelings of, oh, this isn't going to work out nicely, or I never had fill in the blank. I never have, and I never will have fill in the blank, or whatever are those types of feelings that get stuck in those spots where the melody gets stuck. And it's interesting that we're talking about it as a melody, because what I'm noticing is that the oil that goes into the gaps and unsticks the melody is actually coming from the heart area. It's coming from the center of feelings and the center of emotional wisdom, and the place where we access the deepest impulses of our own nature is here in the heart energy center. So there's a whole spread, a variety of different heart impulses that are rising from this center. It's interesting because in my picture, the line, the gap between the unmanifest and the manifest tends to come right in here of my body as well. So that's sort of interesting. And the intellect is up here in the clouds. So it all fits together. It's so integrated, isn't it? There's a lot of integration synchronies. When the system starts to flow And we start to actually, the movement down here in the gap of the transformation that's taking place. One of the validations from the environment are synchronies. You see the image just lit up as well. It keeps going on and off because the clouds keep coming and going outside. Anyway. Feels like there's a lot of emotional purification with this particular healing. But the beauty is that as the more discordant feelings roll out of the system and roll off the system, and these discordant feelings are absolutely responsible for the lack of metabolic fire and the production in that environment where the metabolic fire is low, the production or the fermentation of undissolved food. The precise emotions that associate with the fermentation of undissolved food. So we start to see them, we start to feel them, and they're different for each person, which is really interesting. It kind of makes sense in a way, because if there were a single magic bullet to solve all digestive problems or overweight or underweight, like, we would have found it already. We would have found it and we would have employed it already. But because of the variations from one person to the next, and because the digestive process is so reflective of the way we process experience, and that varies greatly from one person to another, it's very difficult to find a single magic bullet. It just is. But what we found is, in a sense, the knowledge of how to move consciousness in the gap is a kind of magic bullet. It's very abstract and sort of systemic in the way it works. And so because of that, this one thing can help all the other areas. But the way it helps all the other areas will differ from situation to situation. So it is. So this is what we're learning. We're learning to function in the gap. In the gap. Going back into it. Asking, how do we not only, so what we've done so far is we've cleared off all the discordant feelings that are responsible for the production of ama. Now the next question is, what can be done to promote or optimize metabolic fire so that the food never remains sitting in the system in the first place? The answer that's coming back to me is that it's not just about, it's more about the eliminative side of the digestive system than it is about the side of the digestive system that keeps the nutrients. We worked yesterday with a big healing for discrimination, so that what is kept and what is eliminated is better organized. So if you missed yesterday's session, definitely enjoy the recording, which you'll receive later today, and you can go back and review that section. But it was right at the beginning. But now we're looking at the eliminative process, letting go, letting go, letting go, and letting go. If we want to take that letting go process, and again, we bring it down into the seed area, and we look at it in the light of wholeness, where the light of the source of creation is shining brilliantly upon it. And what we see is that in every case, letting go is a situation where the material manifest level of creation, the differences and the separations, have overshadowed the wholeness. Wholeness is there at every point. But sometimes it's hard. I think part of the challenge is that the seed of this particular problem isn't really sitting exclusively at an individual level, but is sitting at a collective level. Because a lot of our beliefs and attitudes and assumptions come from collective conditioning. And we live in a world where, bless you, bless all the people who are here with me, every one of you who are here now and who will be watching later. I'm so grateful. But the majority of people in our world aren't quite at a level where they can comfortably integrate this information. It doesn't fit with their paradigm. They see this part up here and they're like, this is all there is. If I can't get it with my senses, then it doesn't exist. But I really appreciate that all of you have this understanding and at least some experience that being alone is a valid experience. Existence in its purest form is a valid experience. And it is an essential part of the technologies by which we understand the manifestation process intimately. Most people just want like somebody else to take care of making things go the way they're supposed to go. But it really is so empowering to do it yourself. Do it yourself. DIY. Okay. Did we finish that one? Did we finish the fire and the metabolic, the intention for the fire to be perfectly balanced to meet and suit specific foods that you're eating at any time? And of course, that discrimination helps you with choices, right? The discrimination from yesterday will help you select foods that will promote the manifestation of divine being in your physical form. We all just want to shine the light of the Creator, right? It's beautiful. That fire is connected to investment in life. That fire is connected to the degree to which we are invested. And the adjustment that's taking place is an adjustment that integrates investment in life. That means engaging with those actions and circumstances and situations that make life really meaningful. It's connecting that with the overarching inspiration for the whole universe, which is divinity or divine being evolving through us as us. So this coming together, it's a marriage. It's a marriage of two resonances, of two notes in the spectrum of the field of sound. Because these are like musical notes. They hum or vibrate. Frequencies, they're like frequencies. We can also call them laws of nature, and we can also call them devas or devata. Because if we think of them as animated forms, they're like angels and guides and the intelligences that both protect and promote optimal health in the body or in the universe. But we can also understand them as basically principles that are responsible for the way the world manifests, or we can understand them as just pure energy, pure vibration. But the important thing is to understand, no matter which angle we take for defining this dynamic that takes place in the gap, is very important to understand it is you. This is what you look like. This is what your body looks like at its deepest, most abstract level before we find our anchor in the unmanifest source of creation, in Brahman. Okay. I have been so long on this. I love you guys. I feel like I could just keep going and going and going. But I promised that we would really look at some questions. This is important. So the question I want to pull out of this, and then we'll go to some questions up here, is there's so much good in this lady's. I just want to share a little bit of her point with you. Here's this beautiful point. To make eating a sacred act. Right? That's what we're talking about. Is it like eating aligns with that process by which the divine integrates with the relative? To make it a sacred act, how do we understand it from the perspective that is spiritual? as the body is consciousness, rather than one that is material. I would say it's not really an either or. The principle here is that the healing, and I think this is part of the healing that we've been doing, is that we integrate the spiritual with the material so that they are actually experienced as one, and one is found in all the parts, right? She gives the example, how could saints have performed miracles on a diet of weak wine, mutton, and moldy bread? I know, right? And then there in India, the breatharians who don't even eat. And I mean, it's so, yeah, it's necessary. So what this point made me think of is a point that came up actually more elaborated yesterday, which is that when we're eating food, we're not just eating the material of the food, we're eating all the circumstances and the elements that went into the creation and production of that food. So all the feelings and the way the cook feels when they're cooking. And this brings us to some practical points. I mentioned ama earlier and how you can scrape your tongue. But there are other practical points too and I think that might be in here, that if we eat with intention, I think it was in this. Yes, eating with intention. So not eating while you're cooking or driving or standing up, walking around or watching TV, but to eat more mindfully. This is an Ayurvedic principle that if we just sit and like what I'm doing now is just eating, I'm just going to eat, and chew the food thoroughly, the digestive process begins in the mouth, and if we gulp the food, then the food starts in on its digestive journey a little bit compromised. So absolutely, when we're talking about the elements that go into the processing of food, the most important of those elements are the elements that we bring to the process of metabolization, which means, do I sit with an intention that this is going to be a way that I glorify and honor the Creator, or am I just give me that junk over there? Just, what is that junk? I'll just take that. Even if the cook is having problems, even if the food was raised under compromised conditions, even if it has glyphosate in it, or whatever these herbicides and pesticides and so forth, or GMOs or whatever, all of it can be transcended if we're handling it at our end, or at least it can be handled. It can be handled in a way where the challenges that are embedded in the food can be leveraged to support evolution and make us stronger, basically. I'm not one to say to you, oh, you should eat this and you should eat that, because every body is different. And if a body has been raised with certain types of food, that body is going to be uncomfortable if it tries to switch around to something else that thinks is more healthy. All right, so this eating is a sacred act. So another thing is to take a moment of silence before you eat, right? Take a moment of silence and bless that food. And another thing, which the same lady who wrote this passed on to me, and I've been doing it for about a month and I love it. So I want to pass on to you guys too. Maybe did I pass this last time? I can't remember, but the metabolic fires have a name, Agni. And Agni is what's born in the gap between the manifest and the unmanifest. All right. So the Agnis in the body, there's several of them, and you can go on my website at the knowledge base and you can look up Agnis and kind of describes the different Agnis, but of them all, Jatar Agni is the king. It is like the main Agni that kind of like oversees and administrates all the others. And there's a mudra for Jatar Agni, like this. And normally, so what you can do is, after you eat, take a minute or two, at least, ideally maybe 3 or 4 minutes of silence with the hands in the mudra position. And I'll post this on my website, so in case you forget. And it's interesting because the thumb and the middle finger have the maximum number of micromeridians of all the fingers of the hand. So there are all kinds of micromeridians that are running through the hand. You've got the hand chakra here. You've got chakras coming out the tips of the fingers like that. But of these fingers, these two are the real powerful ones. So it's interesting that those are the two that come together for Jatar Agni. And then the hands can go in the lap, You don't have to hold them up like this. That's too much trouble. We're just trying to digest here. You just rest them in your lap. Anyway, I've been doing that since my friend introduced me to the idea, and I really, really notice a difference. I really notice that the first moments, well begun is half done. The first moments of the metabolic process when the food is in the stomach, like even just now I'm doing it, I can really feel my stomach going, oh, I didn't eat anything today. Whoops, I forgot. So it just reminded me. So yeah, this is a nice thing you can do. It helps when you're doing this to put awareness on the stomach. And of course, if awareness is subtle, that's going to help even more, obviously. That makes it sound like I'm trying to ask you to like juggle and pat your head and rub your stomach at the same time, but it's not really that hard. Just start with this. And when you're sitting there, you might notice what's going on in your stomach. And when you're sitting there noticing what's going on in your stomach, you might close the eyes and the awareness settle down. That's all. It's just simple. All right, try it. Try it. Okay, and then, okay, so then her number 3 was, could we do a healing to facilitate efficiency in the absorption process? And I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, or maybe it was before the webinar started, I mentioned that ghee as a cooking oil or as an oil that's used in the food, promotes absorption of nutrients. So that's something you can do at a material level, besides, you know, sitting quietly to eat your food and chewing it nicely and all that. Ghee is a good oil that softens up the cell walls and allows the cells to receive the nutrition that's coming to it. But the other side of that question ties into another question that came in yesterday, which was, could we do a healing to eliminate overwhelm? Because the lady who asked that question and the one when the issue of overwhelm came up in yesterday's session, when we feel overwhelmed, we have a lot of trouble metabolizing experience. And when the body feels overwhelmed by different foods, it has a lot of trouble metabolizing that experience. So I think we did a healing for this yesterday. But it feels, because the question came up, I'm feeling another layer of healing for it. And that is that the source of creation is infinite and unbounded, and there, all experience is maximally concentrated. So your connection to source, which is very natural, as pointed out earlier in our session, the connection to source is very natural. And at that level of creation, we are not overwhelmed. You are not overwhelmed. It's only in the material range, the expressed range of life, that one experiences overwhelm. And the overwhelm is born, now I'm digging in, now we're diving into it. The overwhelm is born of feeling of lack of resources to deal. Lack of resources to deal with a problem. It also is born of, this is the new layer, because I think we dealt with lack of resources yesterday. It's born of an imbalance between inner sensitivity. So the senses are taking in like more than the usual amount of information, and the ability to handle the information that's coming in. That feeling of all this information is coming in and I don't have the resources to deal with it. So the healing yesterday for increasing discrimination was to help provide a broader spectrum of tools to deal with overwhelming experience. And this ties into a broader spectrum of metabolic diversity or DNA diversity in the microbiome. The microbiome, healings for the microbiome. So the more diversity there is in the microbiome, the more equipped you are to deal with different kinds of foods and also different kinds of experiences. There is a light medicine. There is a medicine that you can create, that you create. Now, most of you, I would think, are familiar. This would be a good spot to put up a little tag to the digestive mastery exercise. There is a free exercise, a free offering on my website that promotes really optimizes the relationship between the individual and their microbiome. And it's very simple. It takes 10 seconds. I highly recommend it. It is a blessing. It is a blessing. However, in addition to that, in the context of today's session, there is a medicine, there's a light medicine we can make, which creates a feeling in the gut area, which is where most of your bacteria reside, of that life is bliss and life is safe. And this is a great time to reproduce in a diversified manner. Scientific research has shown, could you also please make a note to send the gut bacteria study? There's a really big gut bacteria study that was done on like over 10,000 people, and I think it may even still be going and continuing to expand. And what was found was that individuals who eat 30 or more different varieties of plant-based foods in a week have a much broader spectrum of bacteriological index, a much broader index of bacteriological diversity in their gut. So that's another really simple thing you can do. It's like treat your gut to some variety. Treating your gut to variety of particularly of plant-based foods is very good. But this light medicine is like all that variety of plant-based foods all wrapped up in a big loving package that promotes a feeling in the gut of like it is fine and good to reproduce in particular ways that allow for diversity. I will keep my little child who's a little different from the others. I'll nurture this child. It's very interesting. It seems to be promoting, this is me now reading what's going on in the gap, but it seems that this light medicine produced from the gap, produced down here, your pure potential, in the causal level of the body, is creating an experience in the gut not dissimilar from the experience in the heart. Not dissimilar. It's interesting because we think of, well, the heart center, that's where we feel all those very soft love and compassion and gratitude. And there's a lot of beautiful, amazing experiences that are produced by the heart center. Absolutely beautiful. But the gut has the opportunity at this time and henceforth to also be a feeling center. That's interesting. Such sweetness, such gratitude and love, such reverence, such softness, compassion, forgiveness, appreciation, recognition. All these feelings are awakening in the gut area in order to support it. Yay, we like it. I'm seeing hands go up. So beautiful. So beautiful. I mean, ultimately, the feelings start here in the heart area, but they just go. We can send them right to the gut. And the beauty is that it creates a context for the gut bacteria to live a quality of life that's higher. This is very important, and this is a very important point that came out this week. We tend to think well, do the best we can to promote our own well-being and the well-being of those around us and that we love. So one of the ways we do this is we think well of others, right? We think well of ourselves. We think well to the best of our ability. We try to, if you see somebody young that you love, you think in terms of them being successful in their life and, may they have the resources they need to meet the challenges that are ahead of them and that type of thing. But we don't tend to think this way about our collective. And here's just a little thread that's sort of making its way to the next webinar, because the next webinar is about corruption at a collective level of society. And what we see is that news articles that, hey, you know what, it's going to be okay. they don't sell as they don't have the click. They don't get as many clicks as, ooh, look at this bad situation. Oh, look at that bad. Uh-oh, the dystopia is almost here. Watch out. Uh, so so what happens is at a collective level, we're guided to not think in terms of the highest good for the collective. Even, I believe there's some kind of a psychological, and those of you who are more knowledgeable about psychology than I am might be able to clue me in here, but there's a thing where I think it was discovered in the trenches in World War I that if a man got shot, the people around him would often feel good because it's like, well, that's a bullet that I dodged, something like that. So there's kind of it's like a sort of, it's in the collective mentality of our world that, that the collective, if I've got problems or issues or whatever, I'm just going to throw that out to the collective. That's just going to be my trash dump out there. And I'm of course wanting the best for everybody here, like that I know. But the thing is that we have as much power to uplift our collective as we do to uplift ourselves individually. And in this case, it applies to the collective of the microbiome, which is a massive collective. We're talking through 370 trillion approximately, give or take many billions, 370 trillion gut bacteria in any given human body. That's a lot of gut bacteria. That's a big collective. So rather than thinking, well, the collective, because it's big, it's kind of like big and strong, and it can take whatever troubles I pass its way. No, no, even as a collective, we want to we're diving our awareness down. We're finding for each person in this healing session, we're finding what is the energy signature of my microbiome. Each one's going to be a little different. It's kind of like the soup inside you. Like everyone's soup tastes a little different. It's a little different. But we want to we just quietly take a moment, putting attention on the gut area, saying hello to the gut, saying, I love you, saying, this is me, this is me, this is me. We're so used to that collective consciousness of the gut bacteria that we hadn't made the discrimination between what is the gut bacteria and what is my consciousness. But now some little gentle enough discrimination that a relationship is set up. And the relationship is one of reverence. The relationship is one of respect, dignity, support. It's not what can you do for me, it's what can I do for you, and how do we support each other. And when I'm supporting you to the best of my ability, how does that modify or change your ability to support me? And how can I use this information to be in even better support? How can I use this information, cultivate it over the course of time, so that my relationship, your relationship with your microbiome continues to improve and improve and improve over time. And your microbiome feels more and more that it's living a high quality of life in your body. When the microbiome is living a high quality of life, there's some autonomy, some independence there. Then the microbiome is able to function very closely in accord with cosmic law. Why? Because the microbiome is a collective. And so it is a bridge or a portal for your connection to your cosmic reality. Every single gut bacteria is looking at the universe from its perspective. So with 370 trillion gut bacteria, we're getting a really broad spectrum vision, like the eye of the fly, right? Very broad spectrum vision of what is this reality. That's a huge gift. It allows you, when this relationship is more integrated, it is one of the key factors that supports the individual experiencing themselves as cosmic. We talked about that yesterday, how the universe is your body. This body is the sensitive antenna, but the whole universe is the body. All right, let's go to another question. Dearest, my dearest, thank you for calling me dearest. I love you. Can our powerful collective create, please, a healing to strengthen and repair the gut lining? Oh, as long as we're on the microbiome, hey, why not? Right? Quality of life. Let's do some renovations on this place. So that is only permeable for nutritional particles, which support optimum health and vitality. Thank you. Thank you for this question. And this actually brings up a point that my dear husband also said, you might want to mention this. And that is that certain proteins, naturally occurring proteins in foods and vegetables, and also toxic elements like I was mentioning earlier, herbicides and pesticides. And so these chemicals can have a destructive effect on the gut lining. I'm taking a dive. We're looking down at this situation at its deepest level. As I'm closing my eyes, I'm actually feeling into the lining of my own gut. So we're going to go here and, for any of you who are interested in this, you can put a little attention on the gut lining right now. As we shine the light of our attention on any part of the body, we wake up and activate the intelligence in that part of the body. And as I said before, I'm not going to go deeply into soma and that whole mechanic of how that works in this session, but you can certainly find it on my website. You can find it on other videos. You can find it lots of places. So the first thing we're doing is we're just putting attention on the gut lining, and we're feeding the soma finest byproduct of digestion, to the intelligence of the gut lining. Small intestines, primarily. Also, I'm seeing some awareness also with the duodenum and the large intestine. So it's just kind of spreading out. There's a little bit, the lining differs from one part of the gut to another, but that's okay. And there is, again, the reason I keep using the word reverence is this is the specific energy frequency that bridges the gap from the absolute to the relative. This is the one you need to get back and forth across that gap. So reverence. Talking to the gut lining. The intelligence of the gut lining knows what foods will have a optimizing effect on its integrity and what foods will have a destructive effect on its integrity. So the first thing here is an adaptation or shift is taking place between the intelligence of the gut and a lot of the regulating mechanisms in the brain. Because a lot of the decisions of what we eat and falling into habits and that sort of thing are a byproduct of the wiring up in the brain more than the wiring in the gut. But when there's a nice communication flow, a nice open channel of intelligence from the gut area to the brain area, then the discrimination that we activated yesterday can kick in. And what we want to do here is we want to activate, this is the sankalp, right? This is the seed of this healing. We want to activate the desire, the craving, the longing for foods that actually build up and strengthen the gut lining. I'm seeing it coming forward as a love. Evidently, a lot of our decisions of what we want to eat and what we like to even like putting our attention on, like different shows we watch, or how much time we spend in nature, or how much time we spend pursuing hobbies or working or whatever, all these things are driven by They're kind of like motivated by feeling. Certain things resonate, right? Each person has certain things that resonate with them. It comes back to, very interestingly, some of the initial forms of self. So, okay, as little individual diverse people, our souls are anchored into the source of creation. And the source of creation is unmanifest and eternal and absolute. So down at that level, it's not like there's a lot of characteristics or personality qualities specific. But here at the very deep level of the physiology, right at the gap between the unmanifest and the manifest, our causal, everybody's causal body this is where the first moments of diversification come in, and this is where we start to have personality. But the first aspect of personality is big. It's universal in nature because the causal body is big as the universe. So that means that each one of us is connected to various fundamental, primordial, universal forms. We can talk about them as if they're out there separate, they're out in the cosmos somewhere. But the fact is, they're literally your foundation. They are literally your foundation. But with each one of us, it's a little different. It's a slight variance. So you can say the soul of the whole field of everything unmanifest and everything manifest, there's a single ginormous deity that's all of this combined, right? But that deity divides first into simple divisions. It divides to 3. Then it divides to 5. Like that, it divides simply. So if we follow back who we are, so this is affecting ego, who we are back to the simple division at the source of self, where we connect to the source of self. That level of who we are is incredibly powerful. It is incredibly beautiful. You are incredibly beautiful. And at that level, you have access to tremendous control over how the gap is manipulated. Because that level of self, that's all it does. That's all it does, is reside in the gap and wave after wave after wave. So there, the marriage of intelligence through the body from the gut lining up into the head and through the heart area, and what motivates us, what causes us to choose one activity over another or choose one food over another. No pun intended. Choose one drink over another, sip one drink over another. The decision is often made here before the intellect kicks in. It's made early on. So that's where the change is occurring. That's where the shift in the gap is occurring. It's actually occurring in the heart. And as I mentioned before, the heart feels, but also the gut feels. So there's a marriage taking place there too. So there are 2 integrations that are occurring in the body at a subtle level of the body structure. I'd say at the astral level, right? Because the astrals were the threads or cords, the meridians that run through the body. So the meridians are integrating being between the head and the gut and the heart and the gut area. Very nice. Clearing. We're clearing out energetic ama. We know what ama looks like at the surface, right? That yuck stuff that you get off your tongue in the morning. But now we're looking at what ama looks like deep inside. And absolutely, the presence of ama in the body can cause unwarranted cravings for the wrong foods or for foods that might have a destructive effect. Brilliant. Brilliant. So what we're doing is we're actually clearing ama all the way from the surface, all the way down to the finest level, and activating discrimination and balance in the body, the entire body system from the head all the way down to the gut area, all 3 of these main energy centers, these mahamarmas, so that ama is identified and recognized at its inception. And where it's recognized or identified as in its inception, it looks to me a lot like attachments, like a GUI. That's what attachments look like in the body. When I look at attachments and I see them energetically, they look like ama, like a kind of a cloudy, gooey sort of substance. And attachments are related to covering the absolute with the relative. So anywhere that energy shows up in the system, it's now getting flagged. Oh, this is a spot where we need to anchor back to being again. Oh, this is a spot where we need to make a better connection. We need to go across that gap. And how do we go across the gap? We awaken to and integrate with the cosmic level of personality or self. A very high level of cosmic reality. Very big. We seem small, but we are big. We're very concentrated consciousness here. Okay, how are we doing? Oh, 2 questions. I mean, two minutes. I'll go to the next question up here. Can you please show your diagram of all the levels of the field on your screen for newcomers? So when you gesture, oh, that's such a smart idea. Thank you. Yes, of course. So I'm using this beautiful picture from a beautiful woman who I think is in Switzerland now. She travels around a bit. She may be in Switzerland. I don't think Switzerland has an ocean though, so maybe not. But anyway, she gave me this pretty picture and I'm using it as a kind of diagram, but really it represents this. So at the surface is the physical body, the individual defined form, and then the etheric body, mental body, emotional body. We know feelings are like more abstract than thoughts, right? And then there's a gap right there between mental and emotional. We come down to the astral body. The astral, causal, and these two, number 7 and 8, are all collective levels of self. And I was just talking about how vital the aspect of oneself at that causal level is. So this is a way, energy healers will divide the spectrum from these levels 7 and 8 are the unmanifest level of creation that in my picture are represented by the ocean itself. This is silence and dynamism, remember, and between them is the gap, is the Agni, the fire, the primordial fire begins there. And then this is where we start, manifestation begins. All right. With that, so now you get the picture. This is, and I may always, I mean, I like having this ocean picture so much. I might always use ocean pictures from now on. They're always pretty. And they always, you know, I used this one before. Oh, as long as we're on pictures. Just one picture. This one's kind of like that. No, anyway, okay. Sorry. I'm just playing with you because we're at our hour. Start to play with you. I'm getting punchy, you guys. Okay. Is this related to ruminating over past experience and analyzing what could have been or what might have been? These types of thoughts, and this brings, I will make this one last point. These types of thoughts are more like symptoms of the same imbalance that gives rise to poor digestion. That when there's a tendency to get sort of caught up in these ruminations, that pattern or habit is born of something that's being felt at a deeper level. There's certain types of triggers that cause that rumination type of experience. And what I've noticed is that the triggers that tend to start the rumination are discordant feelings that are a combination. They're emanating from the collective level of self. So they're not coming from, you remember the diagram, they're not coming from the emotional level of self. They're coming from the collective level. That means our collective is trying to evolve, just like we're trying to evolve. Again, we're tying into the next webinar over there. But there's a tendency when the collective is going through a difficult time to be a little harsh with the collective rather than supportive. And we have an opportunity to be really to uphold optimal evolution for ourselves as a collective as much as we do ourselves as an individual. But I think there's an old tendency to experience these waves of purification, and they become more intense, by the way, over the last couple of years, just saying. I mean, with, all the various things that our world has been dealing with, to feel overwhelmed and to not recognize that feeling as something that's within the range of my autonomy to deal. But we exist both at an individual and a collective level, and we absolutely have, each one of us can support collective evolution to whatever degree we are capable at this time. So the ruminations will tend to focus in those spots that we were working with earlier, which are the spots, remember, where the melody gets stuck? That area that deeply you have a potential to bring more divine light and more of your divine being, your divine existence to bear on that area. It's kind of connected into those little feelings of lack and sadness and stuff. Okay. Anyway, there are lots of other amazing questions. Oh, please spell Agni and Soma for the new attendees. Agni is Agni, Soma is Soma, and both of those can be found as pages on the knowledge base, and you can also Google them, of course. And the question, one lady's saying, can certain proteins have a destructive effect on gut lining? The answer is yes. You can also Google that, lectins, Lectins. How can we be less and less emotional overeating and not to behave addictive when we are under stress? Ooh, yeah, you just touched my heart with that one. Some of us use food, some use other things to deal with emotional imbalance. That's such an important question. I'm tempted to do a whole webinar on it. Which would be like a webinar for, yeah, I see other hands going up, like a webinar to balance weight for weight issues. I think it's a big issue. Oh, sweethearts, you're so darling. Okay, good. So maybe we'll write that down. We'll do that as right now the webinars are planned out through, I think, the end of September or October, but we'll cue it in. We'll cue this in. So, all right. It's like another facet. It's like a little more discriminating facet of a digestive webinar. And, because all of you guys did this webinar with me for digestion, you'll be set up really nicely to do that webinar. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being with me. Thank you for the amazing questions. I'm sorry I didn't get to everyone's questions. But hopefully the healings that came through today are the important ones that we all need to have better digestion, metabolization, and elimination. There was a question, did we finish the one for elimination? And I think we did. If we didn't, we shall return, and we will approach it from another angle. Yeah, I'm thinking about that. A lot of these issues we can just go on and on with them. I mean, we could do a webinar just for elimination, right? So I think the best thing to do is because we're at our time and I respect you, I will sign off, but that gives us lots of thoughts, lots of areas to think about for upcoming webinars and upcoming times. So yeah, please let me know as we're going along. You can send in questions for the next webinars. The next one will be on eliminating corruption in the collective. So you can bet we will be also helping our microbiome when we're doing that particular webinar. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for being with me.